Welcome, friends, to the study of section 88. I'll go ahead and turn my camera off so we can kind of go into this together. But my name is Taylor Holsinger, and one of the fun ways to actually start, if you're asked to teach this lesson on section 88, is to look at these verses at the end that were given as a way that we should, as a teacher, begin a class. And this is a lot of fun. I've done this before in teaching. You go through and you kind of read this. But as a single section of study, section 88 is just one of the doctrinal pinnacles of the Doctrine and Covenants. This is just a wonderful high mountain experience for the faithful, seeking to endure to the end, wanting to do what's right, and striving for spiritual peace to keep their spiritual boats moving through the rough seas. And the Lord offers us some really wonderful pieces of inspiration all the way through this section. So let's go ahead and dig in together. Now, this is, of course, a long section, but one of the things that I'd like to just kind of first point out is you look at when section 88 was received. And if we look at this together, you can see, so this was received December 27 and 28 of 1832. Now, if we look back in the context and compare the dates that both section 86 and 87 were received, 86 was received on December 6th of 1832, 87 on December 25th. So all within the same month, with section 88 coming out hard on the heels of 87. And so let's just take a look at what sections 86 and 87 were all about. So 86 interprets the parable of the wheat and the tares with a warning of the coming wickedness and apostasy in the latter days. In 87 was the prophecy on war. Joseph had prophesied that there would be a new era of war ushered in by the American Civil War, which would eventually break out into worldwide conflict and consume all nations. So just to take a look at the context for this, just if we summarize what's happening. So we have in December, war looming. Now, Joseph receives on December, on the Christmas day, that section on war. And it leads to this perception that war is imminent at this point. And as you take a look at the mindset of all the saints is we have this war looming. Joseph receives this revelation that the wars that will shortly come to pass, beginning as rebellion of South Carolina, will eventually terminate in the death and misery of many souls. Now, that crisis was averted, and you see probably a lot of members, and even Joseph, a little bit unsure what to do with this revelation. And of course, the Civil War won't start until after Joseph is martyred. But in the days just before the Lord gives us section 88, he's given the saints these two sections on the coming wickedness and apostasy and war that's going to consume all nations. And that's the context, that's the preface to section 88, which the nickname for this is the olive leaf plucked from the tree of paradise. So the Lord's message of peace to us, when you put all this together, there's this clear message the Lord's trying to get through to us. It's almost as if the Lord is saying, in a world of wickedness and apostasy and war and conflict where we're all so quickly divided, I'm going to show you how to find peace. So with our lives, where we have problems, unfairness, and tragedies, you have a lot of information here about finding inner peace and maintaining hope and tranquility through the pain that we find. So one of the things I like to do in presenting this is to ask the class, of these pictures that you see here, which represents their life right then. And, maybe you're going to pick one of these more stormier or perhaps one of the more calm and serene pictures of peace in your life. And as just a nice way to kind of introduce this, I love this hymn of where can I turn for peace? Where is my solace when other sources cease to make me whole? When, with a wounded heart, anger or malice, I draw myself apart, searching my soul. Where when my aching grows? Where when I languish? Where in my need to know? Where can I run? Where is the quiet hand to calm my anguish? Who can understand? He only one. As we go through this, I hope you're noticing there's an element in all of these images that's consistent. He answers privately, reaches my reaching, in my Gethsemane, Savior and friend. gentle the peace he finds for my beseeching. Constant he is in kind love without end. So I hope you notice the symbolism of the sun and light, which is such an important theme as we jump into section 88 together here. Now I've done this as a kind of a shout out to Choose Your Own Adventure, because when you look at this section, there's so much going on. And what I'm going to do is really focus on the law and glory, and then the universe. And there's a parable we have here, which is wonderful. And all of this leads to the school that we're supposed to establish a lifetime of learning throughout our lives, which is of course where this section takes us and ends. But we have the Comforter, we have the light of Christ, we have redemption, the law and glory, this parable, the do's and the don'ts, and the practical applications of this, the 7 trumpets before he returns, and again, calling for us to establish a pattern of learning, which is a key part of enduring to the end. So as mentioned, the Lord begins this section in verses 1 through 5 teaching about the Comforter, right? It's wonderful to know that there is a member of the Godhead specifically called and dedicated to comforting us, to assuring that all will be well. And so this is the beginning. He gives us guidance. He confirms truth. The Spirit can warn us of physical and spiritual danger, but another one of his commissions is to comfort us in times of trouble and turmoil. So that's the beginning of this section, all of this comfort that he gives to us. Now, from here, we head into the light, and specifically the light of Christ. And I'm going to highlight here in green truths about the light of Christ, but this is so important to understanding this section, and this is kind of foundational to many of the sections that come after this, to really understand what is meant by the light. Let's visualize these truths. So if we look at the light of Christ in verses 6 through 13, you're going to find the following. It is in and through all things. It is the light of truth. It shines from Christ. It's in the light of the sun, the moon, the stars. It's the power of the earth. You can see it's the power by which the sun, moon, stars, and earth were made. It quickens our understanding. It fills the immensity of space. It is in all things. It gives life to all things. It is the law by which all things are governed. So, when we think of the source of all energy and power here on the earth, we will likely all agree that the source of all power on earth is the sun. And from a scientific point of view, makes a lot of sense. Now, the sun, the S-U-N, gets its power from the sun, S-O-N. The light of Christ is in and through and around all things. We also know that the light of Christ fills the immensity of space, like we just read. But when the Lord refers to the light fulfilling the immensity of space, let's talk about what that means. Light is one of these interchangeable words in the scriptures that can often be interchanged synonymously with others. So let's take a look at the interchangeable words with light that we find in the scriptures. First, we have the 3 L's in verse 16 of light, life, and law. So the power is all 3. And from 50:27, we can add spirit and power. And from 84:45, we can add truth. And then from 93:36, glory and intelligence. So again, when we talk about the light of Christ, what are we talking about? Right? We're talking about spirit and power and glory and life and law and truth and intelligence. All of these here. So I'll list them out. So we could talk about the light of Christ as the power of Christ, as the glory of Christ, as the law of Christ. It's the power by which the sun was created. And so, of course, Christ, he understands it. He knows how it works. He's the ultimate source and author of life, light, and power. So this helps broaden our understanding. When God created the earth, his first words were, "Let there be light." And some have wondered how God could create light before he even creates the sun, which doesn't happen until the 4th day. Well, if we use the interchangeables, we can understand, let there be intelligence, let there be truth, let there be law. When we hear let there be light, there's a lot of rich meaning. So now the light proceeded forth from the immensity of God to fill the immensity of space. I put this together a few months ago, but just so I can now combine this scriptural understanding with at least with the science scientific community understands about the immensity of space today. So you can see this little dot. Here's Earth, right? Within our galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy. Now, to go from Earth to Mars by the speed of light, that's 20 minutes. Here's the size of our galaxy, which is over 100,000 light years, right? So a signal that's sent from Earth to Mars at the speed of light, 20 minutes. Now, the Milky Way galaxy, over 100 billion suns, 100 billion stars, which equates to well over 100 billion planets. Also, just to give some context here, that little yellow square, that's 99% of everything that's visible with the naked eye. That's all that we could see of just our own galaxy. And the Milky Way galaxy is actually just one of 54 galaxies within what's called our local group. And our local group is one of 100 groups. And each of the 54 galaxies, let me go back right here, just to remember this. So each of the 54 galaxies in our local group has about 100 billion planets and stars. Just putting things in a little bit of perspective. Now, within the Virgo supercluster, our local group is one of 100 groups, each with about 50 galaxies. So now we're talking about 5,000 galaxies, and each galaxy with about 100 billion planets. Now, if Virgo is just a tiny lobe of the Laniakea, I think I'm pronouncing right, supercluster with 100,000 galaxies, now what's 100,000 times 100 billion? We're starting to get some perspective of the Laniakea supercluster with 100,000 galaxies. This is now 520 million light years from one part of the supercluster to the other. And even the Titanic Laniakea supercluster is just a tiny and insignificant part of everything that we know of within the observable universe. So again, we're talking about the light of Christ, the law, the life, the spirit, intelligence, power that fills the immensity of space. So the observable universe, now we're talking about 2 trillion galaxies, and each of those with about 100 billion planets and star combinations, right? Just our Milky Way galaxy, 100 billion, right? But now we're talking about the observable universe, 2 trillion galaxies. It's more stars than there are grains of sand on the entire Earth. It should sound familiar with scriptures, right? The observable universe, 93 billion light years across with over 2 trillion galaxies. It's just, we're only talking here about the observable universe. Then, of course, we talk about filling the immensity of space, the entire universe that's outside of even the observable universe, which is there spelled wrong. All right, so the Comforter. Now we're talking about light and broadening our understanding of what light is and what it means for that light to fill the immensity of space, right? He's setting the foundation here for us. And now we move to the redemption. Now, we'll just move over this part quickly. We know death is not the end. The world is filled with physical pain and disease and suffering, and resurrection is going to take care of all of that. And for those of us who know someone sick or injured and struggling almost every single day as a result, my faith in the doctrine of the resurrection and the redemption brings me incredible peace. I know that those we love will be fully restored. The soul and personality of anyone injured lives on, and one day we will get to see those we love alive and well, and we'll talk and laugh and rejoice. The doctrine of redemption is also a wonderful doctrine of peace. So the Comforter, the light understanding, the light and power and truth and life of Christ, combined with the redemption of the soul. As now we're building on these doctrines together. And now we're ready to move into the heart of this section, the verses on the law. And if there was only one verse in this section that for us would help us better understand the law, it's going to be verse 40 here. It contains the key to understanding the entire truth. In science, there are laws and theories. A law is an irrefutable fact of observation. They describe what happens in a given situation, like the law of gravity, the laws of thermodynamics. You have Newton's laws of motion and so on. And then if you think about magnets, let's talk about attraction. In science, you may have heard that opposites attract, but is that true in celestial science? According to verse 40, what attracts what? So I love the nouns in this verse. For nouns, we have intelligence, wisdom, truth, virtue, light, mercy, and justice. And then the verbs, or the F's, as we might call them, the cleaveth, receiveth, embraceth, loveth, claimeth, continueth. So what's the law in heaven? Likes attract. Similar qualities or characteristics draw those same things toward them. Truth naturally attracts and draws more truth. Virtuous things attract more virtue. Now, with that principle or that law in hand, if we look at this next segment in verses 20 through 24, we see now additional insights about the law. So the law, and we're going to combine this with glory. So you see in my magnet, law and glory. So we're going to talk about how these relate to one another, law and glory. I'm going to pull back here all my nouns and verbs. So we'll put this all together here. So this is how this works. Each of the kingdoms is going to exert a force. These things that are like each other are drawn towards each other. So let's talk about how this works in the context of celestial law. If I've lived my life striving to live a celestial law and acting like a celestial person would, then the celestial kingdom will draw me towards it naturally, because like things attract. If I've lived a virtuous life, then I'm going to be drawn towards a virtuous location. If I've sought for and loved intelligence and truth and life, truth all my life, then I'm going to naturally be drawn to a location of intelligence and truth. But if I'm not able to abide a celestial law, if I haven't lived my life creating a celestial magnet, then I can't abide a celestial kingdom because the attraction isn't there. It's as though you're placing opposing magnets next to each other. That's kind of visualized here. There's a repelling force. They do not connect. An individual who has not lived a celestial law is not going to feel comfortable in a celestial kingdom. They feel out of place. But if I'm able to live a terrestrial law, well, the kingdom will draw me towards it. That kingdom will. The same with the celestial kingdom. But if someone doesn't want to live a law at all, but seeks to become what verse 35 calls a law unto itself, and they decide that they're just going to do their own thing, create their own law, do it their way, well, then there's no kingdom that is drawing them to it. Since they haven't created the magnet or any portion of God's law, then there's nothing within them that attracts them to any portion of God's glory. So they attract nothing, therefore they receive nothing. No light, outer darkness is what we refer to that. And that's what verses 32 to 35 discuss. If you go through and you look at that. Well, let's look at a few more verses in 28 and 29. 28, they who are of a celestial spirit shall receive the same body, which was a natural body. Even ye shall receive your bodies, and your glory shall be that glory by which your bodies are quickened. Ye who are quickened by a portion of the celestial glory shall then receive of the same, even a fullness. So we can really see the law of likes attract here. And so we can express it like in this way. So I'm going to build this out here. So if I live a celestial law, then I will be of a celestial spirit and be resurrected with a celestial body and inherit a celestial glory. So these verses reiterate the same principles. So whatever law we live is going to attract us to that type of glory, which is what we're talking about here. But let's look at this through another lens. So when we read together in verses 36 through 39, let's take a look here. All kingdoms have a law given. So you can see this in the context of biology, right? So think about what it is to be a fungi or to be, any member of one of these animal kingdoms, right? And there are many kingdoms, for there is no space in which There is no kingdom, right? There's no animal that doesn't belong to a kingdom. And there is no kingdom in which there is no space, either a greater or lesser kingdom. And unto every kingdom is given a law. And unto every law there are certain bounds, right? Bacteria wants to be a fungi, it's not going to work, right? There are certain bounds that are going to assign them to one kingdom or the other. And unto every law there are certain bounds and also conditions. All beings who abide not in those conditions are not justified. So I love this story, and this relates this from the life of the prophet President Russell M. Nelson. And he talks about graduating from medical school and pursuing this advanced education in surgery. And at the time, there was no such thing as heart surgery, as many of us know. He is a world-renowned heart surgeon because of what he describes here and applying what he learned about these laws. And he says, I teamed up with these other researchers in this daunting task of trying to make an artificial heart and lung machine. And he said, we knew that they were going to run into a lot of problems because there was a lot that they did not know about how you could stop the heart in order to operate on it. And he says, one day, two truths articulated in the Doctrine and Covenants that we're sitting here spoke to my mind. These truths were first, all blessings predicated on obedience to law, and second, to every kingdom there is given a law given. And I reasoned, if every kingdom had a law, there must be laws that govern the beating heart. And I was going to discover those and obey them. In medical school, I'd been taught that if one touched the beating heart, it's going to stop. However, one of the first laws we discovered in the lab was that we could touch the heart of an animal without it losing its heartbeat. And that allowed them to open their doors to additional understanding. We learned if we did this, if we added potassium chloride to blood, the heart would stop. And then if you take that away, then the heart would turn back on. And that allows them to actually work on a beating heart. Then if we continue on, he says he was sharing this with a prominent professor, and the professor says, well, what if it doesn't work? And his answer, it always works. It's based on divine law. Divine law is incontrovertible, right? It's the law of gravity and the laws of foil and lift that allows airplanes to fly. Doctors and pilots, they're not inventing laws, they're discovering them. So we have this truth. We talk about how these truths bring us peace. So we can have peace in this world by living by laws. And if you're merciful to others, if you're virtuous, if you're kind, if you're loving, if you have a love for truth and intelligence and wisdom, you're naturally going to be drawn to those things in our lives and with our families. Likes attract. As parents, and in whatever stage you're in, as you strive to be good and hardworking and patient and loving and courteous, right? Those things are going to attract you to more of the same, those same exact things in other people. Likes attract, and this is an important truth. If you act a certain way, you're going to attract more of that into your life. So, from teaching us about kingdoms and their associated laws and glories and bodies, from here, the Lord now invites us to ponder the universe. In verse 40 is the transition from this portion of the kingdoms, the law and glory, to the section on the universe that makes clear that likes attract. Intelligence, wisdom, truth, virtue, light, mercy, they all cleave to receive, embrace, and claim their own, along with justice and judgment that go before the face of him who sitteth upon the throne and governeth and executeth all things. But now that we have this understanding of kingdoms and their laws and glory, now he's going to connect these eternal truths and doctrines to some of the most beautiful parts of our mortal experience that we have just living here in this beautiful place. And while we may at times feel as we study this next part that he's giving us a lesson in astronomy, he's not. He's using the beauty of the world around us in the universe to teach us his truths and doctrines so that we can have peace in this life. So just think really quickly how many times you've looked up at the stars at night, particularly when you're away from a lot of light and pollution, and you see the stars and you see the Milky Way cutting a swath of light through the middle of the night sky. It's so beautiful. And for these verses, it really helps to look at some of the images of space and the earth and the planets. And as we look at these scenes, the Lord wants us to know that what we are looking at are not just simply landscapes and starscapes. As we are able to peer further into space than ever before, what does he really want us to see? Astronomy, certainly, right? But instead, we should look with our hearts and our spiritual eyes, and we'll see portraits. These are, and there are so many in the world today who see and worship the handiworks of the Creator, but who completely fail to see the Creator or the creations that they so love and cherish, and they miss the portraits of the same individual. For all this beauty, who are these really helping us to see? All of this is an extension of God. So, if I go back and we read this, he comprehendeth all things, and all things are before him, and all things are round about him, and he is above all things, and in all things, and round all things, and all things are by him, and of him, even God, forever and ever. Right? All of this is an extension of God, including both myself and you. My time to be on earth right now in 2022, right? My season as a baptized member, accountable for what I know, given my unique understanding and capabilities and talents and circumstances. Right? In putting this, and again, verily I say unto you, he hath given a law unto all things by which they move in their times and their seasons, and their courses are fixed, even the courses of the heavens and the earth, which comprehend the earth and all the planets. And they give their light to each other in their times and in their seasons and in their minutes and their hours and days and weeks and months. All these are 1 year with God, but not with man, because all truth can be circumscribed into one great whole. The earth rolls upon her wings, and the sun giveth his light by day, and the moon giveth her light by night, and the stars also give their light, as they roll upon their wings in their glory, in the midst of the power of God. Unto what shall I liken these kingdoms, that ye may understand? Behold, all these are kingdoms. And any man who hath seen any of the least of these hath seen God, moving in his majesty and power. And I say unto you, he hath seen him. Nevertheless, he who came unto his own was not comprehended. Right? These verses promise that there will come a day when we will fully grasp this truth. Right? And it's beautiful. Right? Then shall ye know that ye have seen me, that I am the true light that is in you, that you are in me. His face will be familiar to us because we will have seen it already in the universe and the people around us, and even hopefully within ourselves. This image here with 48, I say unto you, he hath seen him. Nevertheless, he who came into his own was not comprehended. The light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. Nevertheless, the day shall come, when ye shall comprehend even God, being quickened in him and by him. Then shall ye know that ye have seen me, that I am, and that I am the true light that is in you, the true life, the true power, the true spirit, the true intelligence. And you are in me, otherwise ye could not abound. These verses promise there will come a day when we will fully grasp this truth. So these are portraits of God. Remember that he's in and through and around all things, and the power by which all things were made. All things testify of him. All things denote there is a God. Even the earth and all things that are upon the face of it, yea, and its motion, and all the planets which do move in their regular form do witness that there is a supreme creator, which is the point that Alma made to Korihor. When we look at the world and the universe that God has created, we're really seeing God moving in his majesty. So this is the truth that we love. Right? We see the face of God in the world and the universe around us. And I actually think that it takes a lot more faith when we look at these things to see it as somehow some giant cosmic accident or the product of some kind of infinite coincidence, to believe those kinds of things, it becomes very, very, very difficult. If you consider the Earth itself, it's placed in the exact perfect distance from the sun to support life. If it's just a little bit closer to the sun, all life would die. If it's too hot, if you move just a little bit further away from the sun, all life would die because it would be too cold. Even just that little bit of tilt in the axis of the Earth, that wobble, creates the seasons that make it winter on one half of the world and summer on the other. And that's just one of the factors that make this planet capable of supporting life. And there are so many others. The Earth's placement in the galaxy itself is ideal. The fact that it has a large moon, the amount of water on it, its oxygen-rich atmosphere, its moderate rate of rotation, right? All these conditions have to be just right for a planet like Earth to support life. It's just so many coincidences to even be considered a coincidence. We have the handprints of divinity everywhere we look. This is the truth that can bring us peace. Observing the beauty and order of the world and universe around us brings us peace. That's why when you're sitting next to an image like this, a clear mountain lake brings us peace, or looking at a waterfall, or sitting next to the ocean, it's no wonder that when you're staring up into the night sky, it's peaceful and awe-inspiring. It's the reason, because on some level within all of us, we're recognizing the hand and the presence of God in everything we're looking at. It's his way of saying, I'm here and I love you. Now he's going to take that idea and he's going to build on it with this fascinating little parable, and it's profound in its doctrinal implications, but it's also profound in its personal application. So we're going to first identify the different elements of the parable. And there's not that many. So we have the Lord of the field, and we have the field itself, and we have the servants, which are the different worlds, and the visiting, which are the appearances of the Savior. So let's take a look at this together. Here's the field. Here's the Lord of the field. Behold, I will liken these kingdoms unto a man having a field, and he sent forth his servants into the field to dig in the field. And he said unto the first, Go ye into the field, and in the first hour I will come unto you, and ye shall behold the joy of my countenance. So here we have servant one. And he said unto the second, Go ye into the field, and in the second hour I will come unto you, and ye shall behold the joy of my countenance. And he said unto the third, saying, I will visit you. And he said unto the fourth, and so on to the 12th. And the Lord of the field went unto the first in the first hour, and tarried with him all that hour. And he was made glad with the light of the countenance of his Lord. And then he withdrew from the first, that he might visit the second also, and the third, and the fourth, and so on unto the 12th. And thus they all received the light of his countenance, every man in his hour, and in his time, and in his season, beginning at the first, and so on unto the last. And from the last unto the first, and from the first unto the last. Every man in his own order, until his hour was finished, even according as his Lord had commanded him, that his Lord might be glorified in him, and that he and his Lord, and that they all might be glorified. Therefore, unto this parable I liken all these kingdoms and the inhabitants thereof, every kingdom in its hour, and its time, and its season, even according to the decree which God hath made. We are not alone in the universe. Verse 61 tells us he's likening the servants to these kingdoms and the inhabitants thereof. The visiting would be a personal appearances or visitations of the Savior to each of these worlds. This is not the only planet that Christ cares about or watches over. This is the only world where he came and lived as a mortal man, but he has visited all the others. He probably visits them much in the same way that he visited the Nephites in the Book of Mormon, appearing and blessing and teaching. He didn't live there, but he visited them. And so he visits these kingdoms one by one, each in their turn, But not just once, but back and forth, from the first to the last, and the last to the first, and the first. He's quite a busy Savior. But is he too busy? I feel that there are several different things that this parable teaches us beyond just the doctrinal implications of worlds without number that Christ visits. It's what that reveals about his character. It reveals the Lord loves his children. He makes time for each and every one. Remember his visit to the Nephites, where he gives time and attention and blessings to each individual, one by one. Here we're seeing that same interest and concern played out on a universal scale. This is the kind of God Jesus is. And well, since this is an aspect of his character, we can apply this on an individual level as well. Christ has time for me. He has time for you. He can visit worlds without number. It brings peace. And what does his presence bring? Joy. And there's another thing I want to point out. We tend to focus on the fact that when he comes and he visits, he doesn't stay, he withdraws. And this is very consistent with our lives and how we know the Savior. Sometimes we feel his presence very powerfully, and sometimes we don't. And there are natural rhythms of these kinds of spiritual experience that allow us to grow and live and ponder and learn to walk on our own 2 feet. And we have to become comfortable with the withdrawals as we are and glory in his visitations. So there's a lot for us to ponder spiritually as we look through this together. Well, as you go into this last portion here, there are a lot of things that he asks us to do. And you can go through and you can see the things that he's saying. Do all of these things. And I'm just going to build this out and invite you to go through and consider this on your own when you have time. And then what he does is, there's a lot of do's. And this, I think, is pretty wonderful when you look through a lot of this together, where he says, seek ye diligently and teach one another words of wisdom. Seek ye out of the best books word of wisdom. Seek learning even by study and also by faith, because education is so important to God, spiritual and secular. And if you go back to verse 78, the one about teaching diligently, he tells us that we should be instructed in all things that pertain to the kingdom of God, that are expedient for us to understand. And then in the next verse, he tells us what's expedient for us to understand. And it's not just religious education, right? You have things in heaven that could be a reference to spiritual education, but also astronomy, things in the earth and under the earth. So we have geology, and then things which have been history, and things which must shortly come to pass, which are current events, and things which are at home, things are abroad, the wars and perplexities of the nations. So we have domestic and foreign affairs, and the judgments which are on the land. So study law, and a knowledge of countries and of kingdoms. So we need to study politics and geography. And then here in verse 118, seek ye out of the best books words of wisdom. Literature, right? The best literature is, of course, the scriptures. But we have Aristotle and Shakespeare and C.S. Lewis and Dickens and Austen, right? There's so much that I'm sure God would add to this list, but hopefully our education continues and that we're never satisfied with what we have been given to understand so far in our lives. Abide, prepare, appoint, love. So, there's a lot for us to be grateful for. You can see when I taught this lesson before, there were some things that I was also looking to point out, which I'll just pass over here in creating a life for ourselves of learning and doing all that we can to make sure that we fill our lives with peace and with the kinds of love and understanding that comes as we apply ourselves to knowledge and learning. So there's so much depth, but I hope that this gives you a few ideas, a few insights, and things that you're able to think about in ways that you hadn't thought of before. May you find peace, my friends, as you live your lives and you go through and and I look forward to speaking again.